Now, the RPG is one of the most eclectic and varied genres in gaming history. If you ask 5 different people what image pops into their head when they think of that term, you'll walk away with 5 very different answers. Now, the West has done a lot to add variety to the genre of the RPG, to the point where it seems that every game released these days has some kind of RPG mechanic tied to it. And of course, it's the most popular form of online game out there with MMORPGs. But which ones did it the best? Well, there are many answers to this and many claims to the throne of the best Western RPG, and with how scattered the genre has become in recent decades, the list has only grown. But after giving it some thought, we are definitely sure that these 10 deserve to be way up there. So with this in mind, I'm Jules, this is WhatCulture.com, and these are the 10 greatest Western RPGs, and say it with me, kids, of all time! Number 10. Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines. The Vampire the Masquerade Bloodlines series is based on the World of Darkness, one of the most beloved tabletop RPG franchises out there, and Bloodlines is the title most folks think of when they think of that IP. And this is something of a miracle when you consider how much of a nightmare development of this game was, to the point where patching the game is mandatory just to make sure you can actually play it without it being fundamentally a broken mess. But once you do patch it, however, you'll find one of the most multi-layered and interesting CRPGs out there. You play as a random schmo who has the misfortune of getting busy with a vampire one night, who then proceeds to turn you for presumably the laughs. You're both then captured by the vampire factions of Santa Monica, who kill the one who turned you and just kind of toss your sorry ass out onto the streets to fend for yourself. The rest of the game is just you, the player, navigating the politics of the various vampire factions, either for self-gain, high morality, or just for fun. The world building is phenomenal, and the many gameplay modes, first-person shooter, third-person RPG, branching dialogue, etc., are balanced shockingly well for development this rife with problems. While it may have had a rocky start, Bloodlines has earned its dedicated cult following in the years since its release. Number 9. Baldurs Gate. One of the most beloved franchises out there is without a doubt Baldurs Gate. Considered one of the foundations of how top-down RPGs are made, almost everything you'd expect from a game of this caliber can be found here. Baldurs Gate starts off rather simply, with your character losing their home and father figure when ambushed on the road. In your quest to unravel the mystery of why your master was killed and who did it, you'll find yourself embroiled in a conspiracy that has enveloped the entire land. While a lot of the game is definitely started to show its age, remember it's about 30 years old at the time of recording this, so it's only natural. But most of this game remains timeless. The characters are beautifully written, the world building is excellent, and the combat is, well, it was definitely of its time and is about as detached as all top-down CRPGs inevitably are, but it still injects a ton of strategy and thought into it, which certainly puts it above many of its contemporaries, which often come off as slap fights that you have no control over. Number 8. The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. CD Projekt Red were, for a time, absolutely untouchable, and that all came thanks to a single game, The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt. The studio had been making Witcher games for years before this, but Witchers 1 and 2, while still being great in their own right, also had their own jank to deal with that kind of held them back from the mainstream appeal that 3 has definitely been enjoying. 3 succeeded by finding a way to cut out all of that while still keeping the narrative and gameplay complexity that the series was known for. But that wasn't all that drew folks to this game, as it expanded on what made the previous 2 games so very fun, leaning into The Witcher as a sort of fantasy blue-collar job. The Witcher 3 really makes you feel like being a Witcher is a full-time gig, rather than just being some hero of destiny or whatever, and that adds a layer of professionalism to Big G's interactions with his clients, and that in turn gives the world its rather unique flavour. Number 7. Divinity Original Sin 2. It can be difficult to reconcile the fact that the majority of video game RPGs simply are not built to accommodate the kind of freedom that you'll find in your average tabletop equivalent. Choices you thought of will just not be available, applications of powers just won't work despite them offering a way to get you out of a problem, and a ton of other things that you thought of that the developers either didn't consider will be present. But this makes the ones that think of everything all the more impressive, and Divinity Original Sin 2 is definitely one of them. Every inch of this game is fussed over like a Swiss watch until it is just right. The characters are beautifully written, with each fittingly being able to act as the main character in their own right, but if none of them strike your fancy, then the rich character creator will sate you just fine. Every single quest, down to the tiniest fetched quest, is rich with character and often carry heartbreaking plot twists of their own, which are completely separate from the main plot. If you're itching for the kind of emotional storytelling that you'll find in the best tabletop RPGs, but don't want to sacrifice having a fun time with modern RPG mechanics, then Divinity is exactly what you're looking for. Number 6. Neverwinter Knights. One of the first really big BioWare games, Neverwinter Knights is a D&D game that helped to put the company on the map, containing a lot of the tropes that BioWare fans are familiar with, but with some very nice bells and whistles attached that classic BioWare fans are definitely missing from their more recent work. For example, unlike even the more complex modern BioWare games like Dragon Age Origins, in Knights, if a companion doesn't like the decision that you've made, you can actually gasp, shock, horror, explain yourself, and help them understand. What a bloody brilliant concept, right? Like the best CRPGs, Neverwinter Knights' world is designed to be intricately complex, and the characters within it have layers to them that the player must go out of their way to discover, since, in keeping with the above example, the writing is realistic enough that they aren't just going to lay out their backstories in the first hour of knowing them, or the 7th hour for that matter, which brings me to the next big point about this game. It is one of the beefiest RPGs on the market at the time, in fact. Fortunately, the gameplay is totally accessible, and the quests are fun and interesting enough to make you want to get through it all. Just be sure to bring a snack, because you're going to be here for a while. Number 5. Dragon Age Origins. Dragon Age Origins holds the distinction of having one of the longest development times of any RPG, with BioWare having begun development at the turn of the millennium and releasing the final game in 2008, which is nearly a mother-humping decade later. The way the coin flip of the universe works in these scenarios is that the game ends up being the best thing ever or an absolute train wreck. There is no in-between, but luckily Dragon Age Origins turned out to be one of the all-time great RPGs. This dark fantasy epic takes you on a journey throughout a war-ravaged land as you, the last of a great order of knights known as the Grey Wardens, must work to prevent the land from being consumed by the zombie-like horde known as the Darkspawn. How many moral compromises that you're willing to make to get there, well, that is entirely up to you. What makes Origins so great is that it lets you be evil, or as good, or as grey as you want. There are many ways to get the best ending in the game, as well as the worst. Or you can work in shades of grey to get the most practical option. However much you accept the moral ambiguity of Dragon Age's world is up to you. Add on to that some of the best characters in gaming history to make up your party, and you definitely get a game for the ages. Number 4. Deus Ex. The immersive sim is one of the most venerated of Western RPGs, especially amongst the hardcore classic crowd. While other RPGs may have player choice as a factor in how things turn out, what defines the immersive sim is that every choice the player makes, both in story and gameplay, plays into the experience overall, and among those, few stand as tall as Deus Ex. Deus Ex is one of video games' seminal cyberpunk works, more or less everything that Cyberpunk 2077 wanted to be, but unfortunately wasn't. The story centers around protagonist J.C. Denton, an anti-terrorist officer who finds himself falling down a rabbit hole of conspiracies, and uncovers a plot that encompasses his entire badass neon-soaked cyborg-infested world. Every choice, every decision, and every word of dialogue you have in this game ties back into the larger storyline, and that's what sets this game apart from the rest all these years later. Well, that and the fact that it's pretty damn ugly. I mean, sorry, it just is. Number 3. Knights of the Old Republic. Knights of the Old Republic is geekdom legend at this point. Even all these years later, it's considered required playing in order to form a full picture of RPGs as a genre. BioWare didn't need to go this hard on a tie-in game that was going to make bank regardless of quality, but God bless them, they did so anyway. The story takes place hundreds of years before the events of the prequels and centers on a young Jedi, that is you, working under a Jedi Knight known as Bastilla, who has just come off a mission sure to put her in the history books, which is the capture of the infamous Jedi-turned-Sith warlord Darth Revan, a career achievement that I'm sure in no way is relevant to you whatsoever. I kid, of course, because it is. KOTOR's gameplay is the gold standard of being easy to learn but satisfying to master. The UI is crafted to help the player learn everything about combat and interaction right away, while being deep enough to satisfy the more hardcore crowd. The world of the Old Republic strikes that perfect balance between being recognizably Star Wars and yet also distinctly primitive compared to even the original trilogy. If you haven't played KOTOR yet, honestly, what are you doing here? Go fix that immediately. Number 2. Ultima Underworld, the Stygian Abyss. One of the founding cornerstones of Western RPGs as we know them today is the Ultima series by the tragically EA'd Origin Systems, and in that venerated series few are more influential than Ultima Underworld, the Stygian Abyss. You, the Avatar, are framed for aiding in the kidnapping of a princess in the mythical land of Britannia, and are thus thrown into the deepest dungeons in all of the land, the Stygian Abyss, where the princess also was taken. To earn your freedom, not to mention your life, you must travel to the bottom of this infamous hellhole and rescue her. Now, the larger narrative is rather unimportant, which is good because the main story is kind of bad and is not helped by really bad voice acting, but it's the side quests and the world building that make this game what it is. The Abyss has been established thoroughly throughout this series as the single worst place in the land of Britannia. The last time that your character went in there, you barely survived with endgame gear, and now you have to work your way through it with basically nothing. What results is one of the finest immersive sim RPGs ever made, where you're expected to look out for yourself at every turn, from being able to take your own notes on the map to having to scrounge for literally everything while interacting with various clans and factions within the Abyss. Basically, Ultima Underworld is a hardcore RPG of the highest and most demanding quality. And number 1, Fallout New Vegas. Now for me, the greatest RPG the Western world has ever produced remains Fallout New Vegas. The Fallout series has had some great entries for sure, but New Vegas feels like the culmination of everything great that had come from before both the Bethesda and Interplay eras, and leaving behind everything that just didn't work. The story begins with you getting shot in the head and somehow surviving. But not even that will soon make the top 20 list of weirdest things to happen to your poor old befuddled mailman of a protagonist, as their journey to figure out why they were shot in the head will take them across the madcap wasteland of the Mojave and introduce you to all the weirdos who inhabit it. The world of the Mojave is some of the most beautiful world building in gaming history, where every single quest is interesting, and all in all, everything about this game just flat out works. There can be no debate, at least in my mind, that Fallout New Vegas is the best Western RPG, and say it with me kids, of all time. Oh yeah. And there we go, my friends. Those were the 10 greatest Western RPGs of all time. I hope that you enjoyed that, and please let me know what you thought about it down in the comment section below. As always, I've been Jules. You can go follow me over on Instagram at RetroJ, but the O is a 0, so go follow me over there and you can check out all of my Warhammer miniatures that I've been painting. Yes, I am a nerd. But before I go, I just want to say one thing. Hope you're treating yourself well, my friend, with love and respect, because you deserve all the best things in life, and do not let anything or anyone else tell you otherwise, alright? You're a massive ledge. Now go out there and smash it today. I believe in ya. As always, I've been Jules. You have been awesome. Never forget that. I'll speak to you soon. Bye.